Welcome to You're Grounded. I think language, communication, and translating thoughts to one another through our own perceived experiences is one of our greatest gifts and tools as human beings. Join us every episode and eavesdrop on what we're connecting on, and hopefully our chats can inspire you and your friends' conversations, and at the very least, make you feel more grounded. I'm so grateful to share this conversation with you. Okay, we are here. I cannot believe this. I have with me today an incredible woman. She is very much a large part of the reason of why we're even sitting here recording together right now today, and that is none other than Miss Brittny. And she is my life coach, my everything coach, my therapist. You name it. But yeah, Brittny is a certified life coach. And a little bit backstory about me and her before we dive into what she's going to share with you guys today is her and I actually, we've probably known each other as far as like I know who you were at least for at least 5 years now. I used to go to Brittany's spin classes, so that was kind of how I knew who she was and knew who she was in the community. And it took a couple years, but I started to learn through the grapevine that she was a life coach and this, that, and the other. Hadn't really felt called or drawn to that in my specific time. Of course, it's something I desired, but finally was able to take action with that last April. So, April of 2020 is when we really
Wow.
connected.
Good. Almost a year.
Yes, I know we're almost on the anniversary, but we were able to connect really wholeheartedly and spiritually, emotionally, everything you name it there, because aside from being an incredible coach, she also leads an incredible Align retreat.
Mhm.
So she just is able to reach and connect and help draw you out of yourself in ways that I think is so incredible and powerful. And we'll talk a little bit more about the retreat later at the end, but that is just one of the offerings that brought me closer to you. I mean, you got the team over there. Got you, of course, and Priscilla leading the retreat, and then Patty and Tiffany. I mean, who knows who else is to join in your guys' future, but I think was the retreat that I was on last April your second one?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
April was number two.
And
Yeah.
you guys have done two more since then, right?
Yeah, three. So we done three total. So there's the first one was February, there's April, and then we just did November. And then we have another one coming up in April again.
Yes. Oh my, I love that it's on April again, so it's like a full year.
Yeah, a full year and it's still going, just
So
amazing.
still going full steam ahead. I'm so proud of you guys, and it's an incredible experience. Needless to say, but when I went to that retreat, was like I said, I got really close with Brittany then, along with Priscilla and all the other women that were a part of that session and that weekend. Um, and that was when I kind of started the grounding and actualization of this whole process of how we are here right now recording this. And what I mean by that was that really investment in myself really made me realize, there are so many things about my life that I really wanted to take charge in and make change in. And one of those being my career and all of that. So that was really a springboard for me to be able to work with Brittany. And then that led me into one on one coaching with her as well. So for the last like 6 months or so, we've been doing coaching sessions together. And she has taught me so much. So much. And so many things about myself and, the things that I tell myself, what they make me feel, what that makes it mean or not mean in my life. And I could go on, but one of the main topics I kind of really wanted to hit on that just blew my mind when we talked about it. This was one of our sessions. So we've had multiple, but one of the sessions we talked about the concept of human beings and their lovely manuals we love to write for our lives and what we go by. So I think that's a perfect thing for us to kind of like put out there for the world that I think they definitely all need to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that sweet intro. It's been a true gift and pleasure to have the opportunity to work with you. I'm always just in awe of the clients that come into my life and what they're able to do in a short period of time and take full responsibility for their life. It's just one of the best things about being a coach, and also just getting to know amazing women. Like, I just am
Yes.
mind blown, and you've been like such a treat to work with, because you're so open to doing the work and you just want to be better to make those around you better. And there's nothing that is more powerful than that. Like, knowing that it's like way bigger than us, but like knowing that it starts with us. Like, we have to take care of our stuff in order to like serve in a big way. And it's been so amazing to watch this journey transformation of like having this idea about the podcast, and now it is coming to life.
We're
You know,
here.
we're here, we're
We're
doing
actually
it.
doing it. We're not just
Yes.
talking about it and
We're
how fun
not
that
just
would be.
talking about it, right? Because it's like everybody has their dreams and their desires and their goals, right? But when you understand the process to get to where you want to go, and the person that you'd have to become on that journey, that's what makes the biggest difference, is connecting to who that person is, not the outcome itself. And it is really cool to get to be a part of that journey with you and get to record this episode with you, because
Yes.
I have seen it firsthand, the highs and the
Oh,
lows, the ups and the downs, everything that you've gone through to get to this point. And this is just the beginning. So it's
oh.
been such a
I'm
treat,
so grateful to start
pleasure.
it with you. I mean, it's only
Yes.
right. You're the one who empowered me to want to really fully do this and motivate me and help me work through my own stuff in my own brain. And it's a lifelong journey. But like you said, I am just so grateful for
Yeah.
you helping me not just talk about it and be about
Yeah.
it.
Well, I will say you empowered yourself. I just helped create the space for you to do that.
Yeah, Brittany is incredibly humble. She is a guide for us to find ourselves. She's
Yes,
not
I'm not here
She's just
to,
there. No, I'm just
I'm
kidding.
just
She's
here. I'm just
fully
here to
a
hold the
reason, but I
space.
love her humble attitude.
So great. So, where do
Yes.
you want to start today?
Yeah, I feel like when you and I had that breakthrough in our session, because here's the thing, we all have what you call and what you taught me about the concept of manuals.
Hmm.
Manuals in latter and in short, really basically being books that we all reside by in what we think the world should act like. And I'm laughing because we all know that feeling. We all think like, oh, this is how I would do something, and this is the way they should do this, and this is the way society should be, and this is the way I would do this, so why wouldn't they do it that way? And the amount of resistance and frustration that that can draw into our lives. And I think that concept as a whole, the more we can be aware of it, is something that is it really just genuinely like blew my mind. I was like, it is literally this simple. It is literally this simple. So I want you to elaborate on the concept of manuals and how all of ours is different. And I really want to just explain like how that can become something that draws a lot of frustration into your life.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is one of the things that we learn, that we're like, and to your point, all of it is simple. We just
Yeah.
overcomplicate things with the stories that we create in our mind. And one of the things that gets in the way of living the life that we want to live, and it's not the fault of the people in our life, but it comes down to the expectations and the rules that we have. And you said a key word, which is should. Whenever
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, they should do this, that is how we know that we have created a manual. you know, People in our lives, whether we know them directly or indirectly, seem like a problem because we've created these manuals for how we want them to behave. And this is tricky because then we tie our emotional life to whether or not they follow this manual. And we don't even realize we're doing this. We
Yes.
don't even have this like awareness that like we've tied our emotional well-being to this manual that these other people have no idea exists.
Exactly.
So let's just start with the basics. Like, what is a manual?
Right.
I mean, basically, like you had said,
Yeah.
a manual is like an instruction guide, a book of rules, expectations of how we think someone should behave in a relationship. And that could be a direct relationship or an indirect relationship. And we also have manuals for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And these manuals are made up so we can feel good and happy. And so you can kind of already tell how that is a losing proposition, because basically we're like, I can only be happy unless you follow this imaginary book that you actually have no idea that
Exists.
exist. We don't tell people our manuals, and we don't
Right.
realize that we have it, and we don't see that it's actually causing us so much pain.
Yes.
There's a part of us that literally thinks that people should just know how to treat us.
Right.
And at times it can feel very justified, right? Like it seems very reasonable that we would want someone to treat us a certain way, right? Like we
Yeah.
have these justified expectations for
Again,
people.
the should. People should do this for me.
Right.
They should behave X because I'm behaving Y. Right.
Exactly. And the reason that this is a problem is it can be damaging to your emotional well-being, because if someone's behavior is dependent on how you feel, you're always going to feel powerless. Now, our manuals for how the world works is based off of how we do things. So like if you always respond to someone's text message right when you get it, and then someone doesn't do that to you, you think that they're rude, and you think that they should just know that they need to respond right away in order
You
for you
make a
to
whole
feel
story around that
right.
action. Yeah, of what it means.
Yeah. So we think it's very reasonable. We think it's a reasonable thing to have expectations of people in our life. And we think that like the request that we have is also very reasonable. But what one person thinks is reasonable and what another person thinks is reasonable, as we know, is very different.
Exactly. And that's why this concept is so powerful to me because it's a pretty wide known concept that we're all individuals. Individual meaning one of ones. That's literally what that word translates into. And that okay, we have that concept, but we act as though there's a certain way that everyone should behave. If we all behaved exactly the same, there would be no mystery to life whatsoever. I mean, we'd all exactly do everything the exact same formal little mechanical way. But I think that's the concept that goes a little layer deeper than just knowing we're all different is we all are different and we all of our little books, all of our little manuals are written slightly different as well. So even though you think there's generalizations to social interactions, even if you think there's generalizations to friendships, relationships of any kind, that's where things get muddled. And that's where things get, like you said, the anticipatory disappointment in stories that you lead to then make yourself feel
Right. It
not
just it
fulfilled.
just feels terrible. I
Yeah.
think the important thing to know and remember is like adults, like they have the ability and freedom to behave however they would like. And we just have to remember that. When we have a manual for someone, it's like just because I wouldn't do things this way doesn't mean that they shouldn't or should,
Right.
whatever that is, because they are who they are and they're going to be who they are and they can be who they are, and it doesn't have to affect me in a negative way.
Yes.
Now, you can make requests of people. I'm not saying you can't let people know your expectations, but
Right.
if you tie your emotional well being to that set expectation and it being met, that's again
The
what's going to make you
powerless.
feel, yeah, you're going to feel
Mhm.
powerless. Like you can make as many requests as you want. So when you tie your emotional well-being to those requests being met and they're not met, that's when you're going to get yourself into big trouble. That's when you end up start like banging your head against the wall trying to manipulate, right? Like this is where manipulation comes in,
Yeah.
because when we try to manipulate someone and we try to act a certain way so they behave the way that you want them to behave, you have tied your emotions to their actions.
Yes.
As we've talked about, is like someone's actions and someone's words and what they do and what they say or what they don't do or what they don't say is a circumstance. We cannot control that in our life.
100%.
And when we try to do that and we try to manipulate it, right, this is when we get into a spiral of negativity. And that's how you can kind of know like, oh shit, like I
This
have a
is affecting me.
yeah, right?
Yes.
Like that's when we know like, oh, we have a manual for someone. Like when we're
Yeah.
tying our emotional well-being, like I can't be happy unless they do what I've asked them to do. And that is, as you can tell, just like speaking about it in this like matter
Yeah,
of
it
fact
sounds kind of
way,
crazy. Yeah.
it's just like, I mean, it's just powerless.
Yeah. And it's one thing to have like a hope or like you said an expectation of how you want someone to behave. That's only natural because our minds are always trying to be predictive and jump ahead of what we think someone's going to act. And we
Right.
emotionally and mentally prepare for that in every single interaction we have, whether we're conscious of it or not. But 100%, as long as you are if it's recurring and rebubbling in your life and you think, gosh, this person, every time I'm around them or every time they do something, it's upsetting to me. And that's valid, but what's not valid is that you're expecting either it to change or you're expecting something you to do to change them. Like you said, you're right. It's everything that they're going to ever do is out of your control. The thing that is in your control is editing that manual,
Right.
right?
Well, like, yeah, I mean, what is in your control is what you think about it. So, like, let's say your partner loves watching football all day on Sunday. Like, their team's not even playing. They just love football. They are all into it. And you have this manual for them. They shouldn't watch so much football. And what you make them watching football mean is that they don't love you and they don't want to spend time with you. And so then you create this story about them watching football because you don't think they should be watching it as much. And you can see that them watching football is not what's making you feel not loved. It's the thought that, oh, because they're watching football, they don't love me. They don't want to spend time with me, and therefore I'm not important. And so
Right.
that's where it gets really tricky because when we have that type of manual, we are basically saying we're unimportant when our partner watching football doesn't mean that at all. Our partner
Right.
watching football doesn't mean anything until your brain makes it mean something.
Mm-hmm.
So, manuals are typically, I would say, depending on the relationship and who is the manual for, um, their pages, they are thick imaginary books. They're
It's an old
complicated.
school phone book
They're
on your
detailed.
doorstep.
That's honestly like when I envision a manual, I think of like yellow pages,
Yes,
right?
yes, me too.
Right? And this is a problem because they're so detailed and intricate and complicated,
Yeah.
and we don't share these expectations, right? We just think it's something the people in our life, or not directly in our life,
Right.
should inherently know.
Right.
Should is always the key word. If you're like, oh, they should do this, they should do that, that's like a number one indicator of a manual. Like that's
Yes.
100%. And like we often we're like, well, they should do this, and then if they're not doing it, it often means that like they don't love us, like if
Right.
someone doesn't meet what we have created.
I don't know
So
if it was you or Priscilla that I don't know if you came up with it or where you heard it, but one of you said at some point, "Don't should all over yourself."
that's me. Yeah,
And I
I
think that's an
still have that. I
important
want
thing
to put
that
that on
will
a shirt.
yes,
Stop
we need
shitting
it on
all
a
over
shirt.
yourself. I mean, should is just like a terrible. It's like one of those things we have to like take that out of our vocabulary.
Yeah.
Should is someone else's belief. Like, oh, when you say I should be doing this, you have a manual for yourself, but like that might be based off of someone else's belief. Um, I think that it's important to know just by being a human adult, like there's nothing you ever have to do, and there's nothing someone ever has to do for you. Like that's just at the end of the day how we can keep things not so complicated. Like we just want to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Like, of course, you can make requests,
Yeah.
but if we're like, oh, someone I need to do, they should be doing this for me and I should be doing it for them. Like, is that actually coming from a place of love?
Yeah,
Is that
what is that
coming?
expectation stemming from? What is that thought
Right.
stemming from? Like, work backward to understand why you think that action means this result, And like you said in
Right.
your example, these stories that we tell ourselves about people's actions, but that's where communication is so key. If you're
Right.
communicating to anyone that their actions are making you feel something, that's entirely valid. I mean, if that's what you're saying you feel, they need to be able to listen to that. But until you communicate that with them, you're literally gatekeeping your yellow pages.
Right.
You
Well,
know
and
what
I
I
think
mean?
a big part of that too is recognizing when someone um when someone's actions make us think the thought that makes us feel that's
Yes.
what it is. It's understanding like what your thoughts are about someone's actions. That's where I think it gets really confusing is like we're so used to being like, well, because you did this, I felt this way. But
Right.
it always comes down to, oh, my thoughts about you doing this.
Mhm.
And that really helps you understand, what you're thinking and how that thinking is making you feel. Because, the problem with the manual is we put our like responsibility on someone else to meet our needs. And even with relationships, like relationships are probably our biggest manuals with like partners in our life and friends.
Yes.
when we're thinking about our needs, if we're putting someone else responsible, we're like, hi, here's all my needs and you need to
Yeah,
meet
you're in
my needs.
charge. You have to do it the way I want without me knowing you, telling you how to do it.
Right. And this is such a problem because we cannot control what someone else does. And when there's a constant manipulation and effort to control someone on the other end, nobody wins because we cannot control another person. And there is nothing they could possibly do to make you as happy as you want to be.
Yeah.
All of the power to feel as happy as you want to be lies within you. Like that's what's so important to recognize. Our partners or people in our life might do things that elicit positive thoughts, right? Like a partner in our life might take out the garbage
Yeah.
without you asking, right? And you have a thought. I love when they take out the garbage without me asking. Like, right? Like, or acts of service is my love language. Like, oh my God, right?
Yes.
So they do an action that elicits a positive thought that
Right.
creates
It's not always negative.
positive,
Yeah.
right? That creates a positive emotion,
Right.
right? Yeah,
Gratitude, thankfulness.
yeah,
Yes,
right. So
yes.
it's like understanding, like, yeah, when they did that thing, I had a positive thought.
Which
When they
made me feel.
which made me feel this way.
Yeah.
When they did that thing, I had a negative thought, which made me feel this way. And so it's just understanding that your emotional well-being is always in your hands, not in someone else's life. If your
Exactly.
emotional life is tied to someone else's behavior, all your power is gone,
Yeah.
always. And then, especially in terms of being in a relationship, like if you're needy, if you need someone to do all of these things for you, like that's not fun. Like, how many, like, I've been called needy before, and was like, oh my God,
Oh.
like, what,
No one
like,
wants to hear that.
no one wants to hear that. It's exhausting. And like, it's exhausting and it is not fun.
Right.
So when people are responsible for their own happiness, right? I'm responsible for how I feel. You're responsible for how you feel, but let's like we can hang out in the middle and have so much fun together.
Right.
I think that that's like such a wonderful place to be.
Yes.
Um, and it's complicated because when you're in a relationship, you're like, no, like my actions impact your feelings, and it's
Right.
like, no, my thoughts about your actions. And when we understand that, it really truly makes relationships so much more magnificent. You're not looking to a relationship to fill the void. You're not looking towards someone else to like complete you.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to take care of myself over here and we're going to meet halfway and it's going to be so great.
Yes. And so exactly the point that you mentioned, I feel like is like a huge factor is your actions didn't make me feel a certain way because that's what we're taught in like kindergarten and
Right.
preschool and like those elementary concepts of so and so did this and it hurt my feelings. Okay, well,
Right.
so and so did this whether it was appropriate or not, but they did that, but your thought of what that means is what truly was the exact direct link to your feelings.
Right. Well, and like when we're developing these skills, we like this manuals don't exist when you're like you don't have manuals when you're a little kid,
Right.
but we hear things like, "Oh, you make me so happy when you do this." And so then as a child, you're like, "Oh, I can make my mom happy when okay, like I can do that." Or, "Oh, you make me so sad when you cry." And it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, crying is
Is
bad because
bad. Right. Right.
so like children is totally different ball game, but adults, the way we talk to children about tying behavior to emotion, that's where it can get really tricky. And honestly, like being, in this season of life where I'm about to become a mom, I'm like so curious, like I'm excited to like have that awareness and catch
Yes.
myself when I'm doing it because it's programming. Like I remember when my mom used to say stuff to me that was like, you do this, it makes me feel this way, and like you tie your emotional well-being to an adult behavior or whatever.
Absolutely.
So I'm really interested to see because I know like a lot of stuff's going to come up and I'm going to have to be super aware of the language I use. Like, is it
Yeah.
about being perfect? Absolutely not. But it's just about knowing how powerful language is and how it can shape how someone views their emotional life. But you do learn it at an early age. Oh, you made Susie cry by doing this.
Right.
And we learn that very early on. But then when we become adults, we have a responsibility to actually shift our focus and realize that only we are responsible for our emotions. Like, yes, when we're younger, it's different because
Mhm.
we're learning these skills, becoming emotionally regulated. We don't have that skill as a child. Then
Right.
when we become adults, it is our responsibility to emotionally regulate ourselves and not. put it onto someone else.
And I feel like that's where people have to take like some self humbleness and some awareness and just be like, okay, I want to, because a lot of people will project and blame and blame and blame for other people. Again, still having that same smaller mindset of, oh, well, they did this, so that's why I'm this way. And having the ownership, I think, is such a powerful feeling of knowing that the thoughts that I've created around that are what are making me miserable or whatever feeling that might be not enjoyable. And
Yeah,
you are in full control of the thoughts you want to have move forward with that action.
right. And like I said, we said earlier, like sometimes it's like someone's actions are going to elicit thoughts that are positive. Like it goes,
Right. It's not always bad. Yeah.
it's not always bad, but like we get ourselves into trouble when it's tied to like the, our emotional well-being.
Yeah. And
Um,
expectancy too. I mean, if you're always expecting a positive reaction from someone, it's going to be that much more jarring when they don't react in a way that makes you feel good. So I feel like it's always, it can go both ways too. Like, as far as you don't want to always expect something from someone, because that's not fair to put on them as far as a responsibility for your feelings either.
no, they're just trying to figure out how to take care of themselves.
We're
Like
all
put
just
the
doing our
responsibility
best.
on someone else. It's not fair. Like we don't want that responsibility,
Yeah.
right?
How
So
would you say is a good way to maybe, if you are having, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to ask is it all internal work, or what would be a good way to maybe have or initiate a conversation like that with any relationship in your life, friend, parent, partner? Like, what is a good way to initiate a conversation about, when you do this, this is kind of what I think it means and what it's making me feel? Do you explain that process, or what is kind of your suggestion aside from just the internal work we can do with our decision making about thoughts? What is kind of the way that you think is like a proper way for helping people have those conversations?
a great question. Well, I mean, this is always inner work, right? It's like
Yeah.
first you want to know what your manuals are for people,
Yes.
like checking in with that.
First, you want to take awareness that you're in control of your happiness,
Right,
first and
right.
foremost. Yes.
Yeah.
Then
So to
realize the
understand that,
manuals.
you always want to check in. Like if you're going to have a conversation with someone about when they do this, you have thoughts about it and it makes you feel XYZ. Are you having the conversation to feel better? Because that's a lot of the times is like, oh, I need to talk to them about this. And if the answer is yes, then you haven't done the work internally yet.
Mm.
Because again, the conversation is if it's to make you feel better, again, you're putting that responsibility on the person and having the conversation so they can say something or do something differently, right?
Yeah. To make you
Um,
feel a different way.
Make it
Yeah.
feel a different way, but then it's like still not getting it, right? Still not
Right.
understanding that no matter what someone says or does, only you're responsible for how you feel.
Right.
So the alternate to having a manual guide your thoughts is taking responsibility for your thoughts. Always. Always, always, always like take responsibility for your thinking.
Mm.
If someone does not meet your request, like I said, you can make requests, you can have expectations. Like I'm
Yeah,
not saying
that's
don't
part
make
of human
requests, right?
experience for sure. Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying, you stay with people who aren't in alignment with your values, right? Or treat you in a way that's against how, like, I'm not suggesting that
That's
at
not,
all.
yeah, that's not good or healthy for anyone. That's not what you mean.
No, it's just taking responsibility for how you feel, right?
Yeah.
So you make a request and someone doesn't honor it. You take responsibility for how you feel about it. That's the alternate to like having a manual. So this is dropping your guide and taking responsibility. When
Yeah.
you do that, you're no longer attaching your emotions to their behavior because someone's behavior is a circumstance, right? It's a fact.
That
It's
you
something
cannot
you cannot
control.
control, right? So the more you try to change someone to be more like the way you want them to, will never work.
To be more like your manual.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it just will
Hmm.
never work. And it
Yeah.
makes you freaking,
And it makes you crazy.
yeah, it makes me freaking crazy.
Z.
But when you let go of the rules and the expectations and like all of the things, all of the things that you have for that person, you allow them to be who they are and who they want to be without trying to change them. And then we can understand that person from a different perspective without clouding our thinking with how we think they should behave or how we want them to behave.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have the manual, you can get curious. You're like, hmm, I want to understand this person.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting that they do this, and maybe if I'm not getting all like wrapped up in my manual for this person, I could actually understand them from a different perspective and a different light. But when you're like forcing them to try to change or fit in this box of the way that you want them to be or how you want the world to be, you're missing out on opportunity to dive into that perspective.
It's funny, I just was looking over at my notes from that session I had with you. And something that just struck a chord with me was the word you said, resistance, because that was something that definitely was what struck with me. And being curious was also the other word, was the more you can turn your frustration, resistance, any type of energy that's making you feel like locked up with someone that you're interacting with into curiosity. I mean, that is the freaking golden star in Mario Kart to like jet forward, you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the way I picture it, is it's like whoosh, this portal opens where you can just like finally be free instead of resisting and being like, well, they should be more like me. They should do this. Again, the shooting all over yourself is not productive. But understanding people where they're at, giving them that grace, and then also just being so curious of why they behave the way they behave. Because in the end of the day, every single person's going to be different than you. Every single person, even if you have like people that are in your life, that's why we have friendships, because they're similar to us. But everyone else that you interact with, just be like, huh, I wonder what would make them react or act that way. I wonder what, and that curiosity, I think, is such a powerful mind flip. It's like, I'm not resisting the way they are. I'm curious how they are the way they are. And
Right.
that was such a powerful, powerful shift for me, because I still catch myself. This is something we're all gonna have to do the rest of
Oh,
our
for
life,
sure.
is just resonating back in that concept is like if someone like annoys me, pisses me off, I can just be like, okay, I felt that, but I wonder why they would feel like that was an okay thing to do, or I wonder why that is the reason they are acting that way. And not even just curious about them, curious about why you have the immediate thought you do about that action.
Yeah.
I think is
Like,
just as
why is what
powerful
they're
too.
doing so triggering? Why can't I be happy unless they do this said thing? So when you let go of those manuals and you just allow yourself to be, an emotionally mature adult and be like, I'm responsible for my emotions. I mean, everybody wins in that place,
A
right?
hundred
Like,
percent.
we can set boundaries with people, and boundaries are appropriate, and boundaries are created from a place of love, but not from a place of trying to control or manipulate other people.
Yes.
And that's what we always have to remember is like, when we are trying to control or manipulate, it's not coming from a place of love.
No. It has to be, the boundaries have to be for yourself and for what you need in order to behave in your best self. It's not because, okay, I'm setting this boundary so they don't do this. No, I'm setting this boundary so I can control and know my thoughts better about the situation and have the time that I need to reflect, or whatever the boundary is. I mean, a boundary can
No, no,
be
no, no.
technically anything.
The boundary is always for you, and it's
Yeah.
never against another person. And you can totally set that as long as you're not trying to control or manipulate. And when you're trying to control or manipulate, because when you're trying to control or manipulate, it's trying to make you feel better.
Yeah.
But when we know that only our responsibility is to make ourselves feel better, I mean, that's where we stay in our power. It's a practice for sure, because we grow up learning otherwise. But now, as adults, as we shift into being an emotionally mature adult, it is so important to just take a step back and recognize that other people's behaviors will never, ever control how we feel. Ever. Only our thoughts about their behavior, right?
Mic drop.
Our thinking is what is going to affect how we feel.
Yes.
So let's say someone does follow your manual, right? Like, you have this manual, you're like, oh, like, they're following it. They text me back as soon as I text them, right? We instantly think this person cares about me and they like me, right? And that thought might make you feel good.
Right.
But let's say someone doesn't follow your manual, you're going to interpret it negatively and then you're going to feel terrible. So as we know, like it's not the action, it's always our thoughts about it.
Yes. Yeah, because you technically could think about any action in a lot of different ways, to your
Right.
point. Like, you could take
Right.
that exact action, that was a perfect example, and make it mean multiple different things, and that's exactly the point. It goes to show you can think whatever you want about a scenario. Like, that's why
Yeah.
it's open for interpretation. That's why it's funny. So it's kind of like, okay, are you gonna make that in your power to mean something that's not hurtful to yourself, or are you just making it mean something hurtful to yourself for no
Right.
reason?
Like
Why are you
you're
causing self-pain?
right. Like that's the cause of the suffering, right?
Yes.
So when you stop controlling other people and you take responsibility for how you feel, regardless of their actions, you feel freaking empowered. And then
Yes.
as
You
a
take the
result,
power back into your court rather than handing it away in your little palms.
yeah. And like I said before, this doesn't mean you stay in harmful relationships. Like this
No, not
it does
whatsoever.
not mean you stay in a relationship that's harmful or that's hurting you or isn't aligned. Like that's definitely not what this means. Like you need to
Right.
do what's necessary to protect yourself. Um, that's that kind
And
of
the
goes
differentiation there is
so
like, okay, you're taking in the information of what's happening in your surrounding, and you can choose to either move forward with that. Your control of either you're going to move forward and progress with that person in life, or slightly start to remove yourself because you didn't appreciate, like, your interpretation of whatever happened wasn't exactly enjoyable. So I think that that's how we guide our action in life, is by digesting our thoughts too. So I feel like that's exactly the point, is emotions make you think, or actions make you think thoughts, which make you feel emotions, and then it goes back the other way. It's like, okay, so you thought about something, now how are you going to move after that? How are you going to think after that? What are your actions going to be after that interaction?
like
So
how do you want to think about their behavior?
mhm.
you know um let's say you want your call one of you like you expect your friends to call you once a week and on your birthday, right? Like that might be a manual that you have for your friendships, and most likely you don't like start a friendship and you're like, okay, this is what I expect of you, right?
Hey, by the
You
way,
have this
this
thing,
is my checklist for
this is
friendship,
my
and
checklist is like
study it, there
before,
will be a
yeah,
quiz.
right. Like it's just an expectation that you think everyone understands, right? But let's say you have a friend that doesn't honor this, right? Let's say you have a friend that like doesn't call once a week. You might interpret that they don't care about you and you might feel frustrated, and it might hurt your feelings when they don't call you.
Mhm.
This creates more frustration and more drama.
Right.
All like in the same circumstance, you can just let your friends be who they are. Allow them to be who they are. If they want to call you on, they call you. If they don't call you back, it's up to you not to make it mean anything negative.
Yes, not
So
to let
you
that
can
mind wander
always,
into a thought that might not
yeah,
necessarily be
right,
true.
right. It's not because it's
Yeah.
just a story. So the
Yeah.
beautiful thing is like you can just love people, enjoy who they are, and not have manuals for them.
Yeah.
This is a very freeing way to live. And I think
So
it's just important to
so
recognize
mind-blowing.
like that it's always going to happen. Like you're always like going to feel, you're like, oh, feeling like, why didn't they call me back? I called them and they're posting on Instagram. That must mean they don't like me. Right. The thing is, you can make that request. It's totally fine. If they don't honor it though, it doesn't mean that you don't have to make it mean that they don't like you. Right.
Yeah.
When someone's behavior is, I mean, not when, someone's behavior that they do is always about them and never about you. So they can be
Yes.
who they are, do them, and you can choose to love and enjoy them exactly as they are. If
Precisely.
your friend doesn't show up the way that you expect them to, you can let them know that, absolutely, but you can't expect them to like meet the request. They might
They
not even
might,
realize, oh
yeah.
my gosh, I didn't even realize that, right? And
Mhm.
then that might open up a channel for connection and vulnerability and like a deeper understanding of each other,
Yeah,
right? But if they
absolutely.
don't meet that, it's okay. It has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, and everyone's actions of how they treat you, positively, negatively, we don't even wanna box things in one or the other, but just however they treat you, it's all always about the reflection of who they
It's
are,
about them and
so
not you. And like
not
it's
you.
so great because there doesn't have to be frustration or any like unnecessary
Yes.
drama or
Oh,
just all drama is unnecessary.
It's
But
such a freeing concept. It truly, truly is. That's like exactly why I was like, more people need to know.
it is. It's like when you learn this, you're just like, I mean, and it's constant work too. Like
Yes.
there's certain people in your life that it's easier to allow them to be who they are and let go of your manuals for them, and then there's other people that like we get real stuck on that manual for them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it's just a pattern, right? We're
Yeah.
just like so used to someone's behavior, our thoughts about someone's behavior making us feel a certain way that we're just like,
That's the way our brain has it connected is
yeah,
like that pattern's going to be that much more hard to break because it's been that thought for so long in our
yeah,
lives, you know?
yeah,
So it takes
exactly.
practice. Just like practice of, challenging your own ego every day. I feel like challenging your manuals for people every day, especially if they've been long relationships with family members or long-term friends, like it's that much more work to put in. And then it's just like sharpening your pencil in any mental tool is the more
Yeah,
you do it, the sharper it's going to be and the easier it's going to get. So,
exactly.
thank you for sharing. You are a wealth of knowledge and light as always.
One of my favorite things to talk about. I love talking about relationships. I love
Yes.
talking about manuals.
Yes. Well, this might not be Brittany's last time on the podcast. We'll see what the future holds because as you can tell, she is a wealth of knowledge and I just love that she has the amazing generous heart to want to come on here and share it with everybody. So, along with other podcasts, she also has her own podcast. So,
So,
Brittany, like I want to ask you two questions, but then I want to get into how people can connect with you on their own regard as well,
yeah.
if they do so choose. But I want to ask you, you said that talking about relationships is one of your favorite things to do, but I want to ask you, what do you think your superpower is?
Hmm. Well, um, similar to like one of the exercises that I had you do is like ask people in your life what your superpower is, which
Yeah.
is like your strengths. And I never realized that positivity was my superpower.
Yes.
I didn't realize that, that was like a thing. I thought like people were just positive. And when
Right.
I asked all the people, close to me that like I valued their thoughts and opinions, positivity was on everybody. Like there was not a single person that didn't say positive attitude. And I was like, that's a strength. And then once I
Yeah.
thought back and thought about it, I was like, I guess that is my superpower is
Oh,
I definitely can find, even in some of the shittiest, darkest moments of my life, I have always found a silver lining. And it doesn't mean that I ignore the negative. It's just actually embracing both the negative to be a part, like to bring the positive back into the experience.
yes.
So I would say like positivity is definitely
Oh,
my superpower.
I can just
Yeah.
like grin from ear to ear hearing you say that. And it's definitely one of the things that made me drawn to you and go to even your retreat in the first place. I mean, not every retreat's going to be right for every person, not every experience is going to be right for every person, but I felt so connected to you because of your positive mentality and your positive attitude. So I
Thank
would 100% agree with all those people.
you. I appreciate that.
Yes. And then what do you like to do to stay grounded? Like, what makes Brittany feel good? What makes Brittany feel the most calm? I mean, it can be calmness can come in chaotic activity as well, but what is your favorite thing to feel grounded?
Um, I mean, when I think of grounded, like when I think of the word grounded, I think of just like myself, like
Yeah.
what do I do to feel like myself? And I mean, the first answer is moving my body always. Like that is like the number one thing that grounds me is movement, which is funny,
Mm,
like in motion, but it
yeah.
helps like when I'm not in motion, stay anchored in who I am. But the other thing that I do is meditation. Like
Mm,
that, even on the days that I just like don't want to, and I sit down and meditate and I'm all squirmy and I'm like, I have all these things I need to do. It's always the sign that I really need to spend more time just being
yeah.
instead of doing. And whenever I spend time consistently doing that, I always feel more anchored, grounded, and calm. And it's one of those things that before in the past, it would always be like, I feel scattered. I need to meditate, which
Right.
was great. But really having like a consistent meditation practice has helped prevent that scatteredness
Yeah.
because it's like being proactive instead of reactive. And I think a lot of the practices, in the wellness world, people lean on when they're feeling lost or scattered or chaotic or frantic or whatever.
Yeah.
And the more that I practice it ahead of time, the less intense those moments are.
Yeah. You also definitely, I still think you need to take me up on my suggestion of recording for like the Calm app or like you
Um,
literally have one of the best meditation guiding voices of all time.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll put that on the list. It's
Add
on
it
the
to the
list.
resume.
Add it to the
Oh my
resume.
God. No, she's amazing, you guys, I swear. And I feel like it's cool hearing you talk about the duality of movement making you feel grounded and then the stillness because we get so much time of our life spent in between those two things of kind of this middle ground. And I feel like you leaning into the physical body movement and being in tune mentally and emotionally, spiritually, physically, and then also your groundingness of absolute stillness and meditation. I think that's so powerful and so cool. Yeah.
I need a little bit of both.
Yes. Well, I just want to extend my biggest gratitudes to you for coming, and I want you to be able to tell people where they can reach you, more information about the retreat and you as a whole and your programs. So give it all away.
Sure. Well, like Beck said, I have a podcast, Positively Real podcast. I have an episode that goes live every single Tuesday.
She's a pro.
Um, I mean, it's like the most consistent thing I've ever done. Honestly, it's blows my mind that I've stuck with it this long.
So
Um,
cool.
and what else do I do? I have a group coaching program called the Mind Over Matter Method, and that will be signing up wait list actually starting in April. So
Perfect. And I can put the links in the
yeah,
description for everybody too, so you don't have to
yeah.
read them out. But so you have the coaching sessions.
Yeah. So I have one-on-one coaching that's most likely going to look a lot different
Mm-hmm.
maybe, but the group coaching is the thing that will stay the most consistent, where I take these topics that I talk about like with you and on my podcast, and we go deeper and I help people really understand themselves and understand their mindset on a
The
deeper
juicy stuff.
level. It's so fun. So that's really what I have going on. I will have one-on-one coaching, but I don't know what that offering is going to look like. It's going to be completely different than what it was pre-baby.
Right.
So that's what we have going on. We have the April Align retreat at Savannah Resort. That is April 8th to
Yes.
the 10th. But yeah, I mean, I'm super excited to see like what comes of becoming a mom and like
Yes.
what direction that takes me in. So
Oh,
I'm
so
just
exciting.
here on this earth just to learn and experience and then take my experiences and teach other people. Like that's what it's all about.
That is what you're all about, and truly what I hope
So,
my podcast is all about. And you have the luckiest kid ever to have you as a mom. So
mhm. Thank you.
I can't wait for you to instill your practices on them, and you're going to be incredible. But I'm so grateful for
Thank
you.
you.
And all the time I've been able to have with you before being a mom is just so special. So I thank you again. And yeah, thank you for coming. And I hope you guys enjoyed.
Thank you. Thanks for having me be your first guest on the
Yeah.
show. So good. So proud
Love
of
you
you,
so
Becca.
much. Thank you.
So great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of You're Grounded. Make sure to share this episode if it resonated with you and rate this podcast on whatever streaming platform you like to listen from. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. All social platforms are titled You're Grounded Pod. Until next time, stay grounded.